Kill the Child. Written by Speedwagon's Glorious Mane. Read by Yours Pranks. This is the main work in their series, Right to Die. The description of the series being Right to Die, a concept based on the opinion that human beings are entitled to end their life or undergo voluntary euthanasia. This is going to be a pretty long fic, and it's still ongoing. As such, there's going to be story arcs that are tagged for the story, but they're not relevant to us yet. I'll start this first chapter with reading the tags relevant to the overall story. As characters and events show up over the story, I'll share the added tags at the end of the Podfic chapter to avoid spoilers. The exception to this rule is if the tags have potential to be triggering to listeners. Relationship tags: Midoriya Izuku and Aizawa Shota, Eraserhead. Midoriya Izuku and Yamada Hisashi, present mic. Aizawa Shota, Eraserhead, / Yamada Hisashi, present mic. Midoriya Izuku and Midoriya Inko. Character tags: Midoriya Izuku, Aizawa Shota, Eraserhead, Yamada Hisashi, present mic. Midoriya Inko. Main story tags: Death Quirk, Time Loop, Death Loop, Suicidal Midoriya Izuku. Midoriya Izuku is dead inside. Midoriya Izuku needs therapy, and maybe a break. Aizawa Shota, Eraserhead, is so done. Summary: Midoriya Izuku has an immortality quirk, though not in the traditional sense. While most other immortality quirks work by not allowing the owner to age, maybe even giving them extra resilience, Izuku's quirk didn't quite work like that. No, Izuku's quirk worked by setting his consciousness back into his 4-year-old body upon death. Again and again, no matter when, where, or how he died, he always woke up afterwards, his small fists clenched around a bright red crayon that he, until the moment of his resurrection, had been using to draw a picture of All Might on a piece of construction paper. Tired after living for so long, Izuku goes to Eraserhead for help in ending it all, only for the man to strike a deal, to wait until he was 18. What better way to kill the time than making sure he leaves the world a better place? Of course, stringing Eraserhead along for the ride and making the man regret his decision not to kill Izuku on the spot is just a bonus. Chapter trigger warnings provided by the author: suicide, kidnapping, and death. Chapter 1. The countdown starts. Shota was going to murder whoever thought it would be a good idea to start banging on his door at 6:03 in the morning, only seconds after he had finally managed to fall asleep after coming home from a grueling patrol. He didn't even care who it was. Shota would not hesitate, not even if it was a repentant Hisashi who had forgotten his key. He would simply need to cash in on the pact that he and Nomuri made at UA, that when one of them inevitably snaps and murders someone, the other will help them hide the body. R.I.P. to Hisashi. If he didn't want to get murdered, then he shouldn't be knocking until 6 hours later, at the earliest. They're still banging on the door. Shota puts on the most terrifying glare he can muster, the one that makes criminals in dark alleys tremble with fear while grabbing his capture scarf. A little grateful that he had been too tired to change out of his costume when he got home, so he wasn't answering the door in his licensed prison mic pajamas that Hisashi had gifted him. In a swift, practiced motion, the capture scarf was around his neck, and he was unlocking the door, slamming it open hard enough that it rebounded off the wall. There was no one there. He looked around, but there wasn't a single person in sight. Shota was just about to slam the door shut with a curse when someone cleared their throat.
Eraserhead, just the person I need to see.
Shota looked down and felt his soul leave his body. There was a child standing on his doorstep, no more than 4 years old, with a mop of green curls and wide emerald eyes, staring up at him. Shota wasn't a violent person by nature, but by necessity. Right now, nothing was more important to him than climbing back into bed and falling into a coma. And if he has to punt a small child off of his property to do it, well... But a little voice in his head, that sounded suspiciously like Hisashi, told him that while he would be able to sleep as much as he would want in prison, being stuck in a building with a bunch of criminals you helped put away was not a great idea, and should be avoided at all costs. Shota sighed. What do you want? Make it quick.
Funny, I was gonna say the same thing,
the kid quipped, and Shota finally took a proper look at the kid. He was wearing an All Might onesie, bright, garish, with 2 yellow things that looked like the #1 hero's iconic hair tufts hanging limply off the hood. The eye-searing colors aren't what make him pause, though it's pretty fucking close. The thing that makes him pause is just how dead inside the kid looks. And coming from Shota, that's saying a lot.
Eraserhead, I want you to kill me.
Shota did a double take. What the fuck? Midoriya Izuku has an immortality quirk, though not in the traditional sense. While most other immortality quirks work by not allowing the owner to age, maybe even giving them extra resilience, Izuku's quirk didn't quite work like that. No, Izuku's quirk had no outward signs, no mutations or secondary abilities. He even had the toe joint, which had allowed the quirk to go undetected right up until he activated it. The only thing this quirk did was send his consciousness back into his 4-year-old body upon death, again and again. No matter when, where, or how he died, he always woke up afterwards, his small fist clenched around a bright red crayon that he, until the moment of his resurrection, had been using to draw a picture of All Might on a piece of construction paper. With the help of far too much practice, Izuku was able to get back to drawing in a matter of seconds, in spite of having just choked to death on his own blood only moments before. Indeed, he was doing a much better job than the first few times around. None more catastrophic than the first time he looped, waking up after being turned into a pile of dust by Shigaraki Tomura. Izuku had ended up traumatizing just about everyone in the room in that loop. Izuku didn't like to think about that too much.
Hey, Deku, look at my drawing,
Kacchan calls out. Izuku looks up, taking a long look at the drawing. It's a drawing he's seen maybe 100 times. Izuku's not sure since he lost count some time ago.
It's us in our hero costumes,
Kacchan exclaimed proudly as he waved the paper around. 2 colored blobs had been drawn on the center of the page. One was orange, red, and black, while the other one was just green. Izuku mustered up a smile and a bright,
"That's great, Kacchan,"
even though Izuku was exhausted. Izuku always seemed exhausted for the next few days after coming back, though the last few times it had just seemed to get worse and worse. Thank God nap time was announced only 5 minutes later, like he had known it would be. Izuku eagerly wrapped himself in his blanket. Within seconds of lying down, he was fast asleep. With nap time over and a clearer head, Izuku was able to think about things, like how much energy he was going to have to expend to pretend to be the happy child he was when he left the house this morning in this timeline in order to keep up appearances, and the crushing weight of despair at living once again, trapped in an endless, repeating loop. And how he was finally going to get that limited edition Eraserhead shampoo when it came out in a few months, even if it killed him. Wait. Hold up. Eraserhead. Quirk Erasure. Temporarily blocks emitter and transformation quirks. Izuku's quirk has to be some kind of emitter, right? So, theoretically, if Eraserhead had his quirk activated and used it on Izuku as he died, it might stop him from coming back again, right? Of course, that is simply one possibility, The other being that Eraserhead would have to erase Izuku's quirk the second it manifested, which simply wasn't possible without his prior consent and the help of someone with a time travel quirk. But that's not important right now. Dying. Of course, he had considered this before, maybe around the third loop, but then dismissed it because back then he still wanted to live. Not this Izuku. Izuku was ready for the sweet embrace of death. By his last calculation, he had lived over 132 cumulative years, and that was a few loops ago. Izuku had become All Might's protege and the #1 hero 3 times over, before he got bored, and decided to switch it up for the next loop, by becoming a support technician. Then from there, he had bounced around. First quirkless hero, and above ground one first, before giving the whole underground hero thing a go. Doctor, neurosurgeon, therapist, novelist. He hadn't actually written the novel from scratch, instead ripping off a popular book that would have been released 20 years after Izuku released the first book. From there, he had simply lived off the royalty checks for the rest of his life. It was quite a popular novel. Picked up a few hobbies before being killed in a house invasion by some stupid thugs. Izuku could have, of course, defended himself, but by that time, he was getting bored and decided to just let it happen. This was when the boredom started really kicking in. Izuku became a really skilled pickpocket, before escalating until he ended up committing one of the largest heists of the modern era. Izuku had been incredibly proud of the 2-scale resin replica of All Might that had been part of an exhibition on the hero at a museum in Tokyo. Then he decided to start causing mischief around Musatafu, mostly spray painting ominous coded messages around the city. The most memorable one had been his last of that run, which was the message, "Have you visited your mother in the hospital recently?" Written in bright blue paint, followed by an incredibly detailed, Izuku had gotten a lot of practice at this point and his art was quite good, thank you, picture of a grumpy looking Dabi. It was the most memorable because when Dabi had found Izuku a week later, spray painting yet another message. This one was going to be directed at All Might because while Izuku still respected the man, he also felt it was his duty to keep the man on his toes, with simple messages like, "All Might's hair actually tastes disgusting," and "Yagi Toshinori for the title of #1 father." Dabi had simply incinerated him on the spot. Well, actually, Izuku had called him Toya to his face first, so maybe he deserved it. Izuku sure as hell learned his lesson and never made the same mistake again. Anyways, back to the topic at hand. So Izuku did some crazy stuff, like becoming a full-time drag queen, and faking a brain injury for a whole loop. God, that was so much fun. Pretending to get knocked out by Kachan and waking up fluently speaking a language he shouldn't know and having to relearn Japanese had been hilarious. Maybe he became the world's most feared supervillain because why the hell not? Izuku died that time when Kachan had gotten a little rough when bringing him in. Izuku coping the full force of Kachan's gauntlets, point blank to the face. At the very least, that death had been pretty quick and fairly painless compared to some others he'd suffered. In need of some serious R&R, he spent his next 2 runs just chilling. His last one he'd spent as a child intellectual prodigy, making friends with Nedzu and running a quaint little flower shop just south of Musatafu CBD. Until some asshole rookie pro hero making their debut had decided, yeah, sure, let's throw a dude with knives hard as diamonds for hands, throw a building, and hope for the best. Izuku, who had been in the back of his shop taking stock and generally ignoring the racket going on outside, had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. The villain sliced his throat open, and that's how Izuku died from choking on his own blood. Of course, those aren't all of the occupations he's had, but they're the most memorable. Point is, Izuku may have completely forgotten the man until just now, but that won't happen again. As soon as kindergarten was let out, Izuku would go home and bide his time until he could slip away from his mother, track the man down, and convince him to kill Izuku. What could go wrong?
Deku, stop mumbling.
Izuku startled and looked up to see Kachan glaring at him. Izuku smiled sheepishly.
Sorry, Kachan.
Finding the home address of one Aizawa Shota was simple. It was more challenging to give his overprotective mother the slip in order to go to the address. Izuku planned this perfectly. He remembered from his internship that one time with the hero that he patrolled from the late evenings to early mornings, and such, the best time to strike would be in the morning, when he is alone before he's had the chance to get much sleep, if any. The sleep deprivation would hopefully both impair his judgment and make him angry when he answered the door to a small snot-nosed brat. Perfect for his plan! Except when Izuku made his request, Eraserhead immediately became more alert and the traces of anger on his face disappeared. Izuku frowned. Of course! He'd forgotten the first rule of battle strategy. No plan survives contact with the enemy. What the fuck? Eraserhead probably didn't even realize he had spoken. Izuku tapped his foot. He had gotten straight to the point. What was Eraserhead having trouble comprehending?
You're probably the only person alive who could truly kill me,
Izuku elaborated.
because of your quirk.
Eraserhead closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Okay, let's take this from the top. He opened his eyes again, and Izuku was concerned over how bloodshot they were. You want me, he pointed to himself, to kill you. He paused for confirmation, and Izuku nodded. Why? Izuku pursed his lips in order to stop himself from embarrassing himself. He so wanted to say,
Even in a room full of people, I feel so alone. No one understands me or the burden this godforsaken quirk has placed on my shoulders. Do you know what it's like to see an old friend on the street, one who you had died for, would die for again and again, just for them to not recognize you? To not remember a single moment shared between you and them? Do you know what it's like to look into your partner's eyes, the person who you vowed to love until death do you part, die, and then see them again, only for them to watch you coldly without emotion, or glare daggers at you every time you pass them?
Instead, all he said was,
I've lived too long, and I'm ready to die.
Eraserhead looked up and down the street, before grabbing Izuku by the scruff of his All Might onesie. The only good part about being a literal toddler again was the clothes. They were all so soft. And picking him up, bringing him inside, and shutting the door behind him. Eraserhead only released Izuku to get him to sit on the couch in the living room of the apartment, before sitting himself down on the coffee table in front of Izuku. They sat in silence for a while, both of them watching the other. Izuku took a moment to look his former teacher over. By Izuku's calculation, he must be 21 right now, and he definitely looked it. His eye bags were still as large and dark as Izuku remembered, though his face had a certain sharpness to it that he would lose in the next few years. He also seemed a little underweight. Izuku scowled.
Have you been eating?
Eraserhead's mouth opened and closed. What? Izuku crossed his arms.
You look skinny. You need to eat something more filling than jelly pouches, you know.
Eraserhead crossed his arms. I don't see how that's any of your business. Izuku crossed his own arms.
As a hero, it's your responsibility to take care of yourself properly so you don't burn out. Do you want to burn out, Sensei?
Eraserhead narrowed his eyes. Sensei? He questioned, before he shook his head. Why do you want to die? Izuku also narrowed his eyes.
I already told you. I've lived too long.
You're a toddler, Eraserhead said slowly.
Yeah, and?
Why was he making such a big deal about this? Eraserhead pinched the bridge of his nose. You're a toddler. You shouldn't want to die. He looked up at Izuku with furrowed brows. Is someone hurting you? Are you safe at home?
What? Yes! No!
Izuku threw his hands up, shaking his head.
Mom would never hurt me.
Is this a cry for help? For attention? Eraserhead seemed so lost. Izuku face-palmed.
No, this is the real deal. Just let me start from the beginning. See, the way my quirk works...
When Izuku had finished explaining his quirk, Eraserhead leaned back, rubbing at his eyes. Finally, he lowered his hands and looked at Izuku, meeting his eyes. I won't kill you.
What?
Izuku uncrossed his arms as he leaned forward to glare at his former teacher.
Why the hell not?
Eraserhead met Izuku's angry gaze, blinking sleepily. Do you want the list in alphabetical order or in order of magnitude? Izuku just scowled at him. Eraserhead blinked slowly, like a sleepy cat. First off, you are a 4-year-old child right now. Do you know who kills 4-year-old children? He didn't wait for an answer before plowing on. Villains. Villains kill 4-year-old children. I am a pro-hero, not a villain. He explained slowly, like he was explaining a difficult concept to a child. Izuku winced at the poor choice in metaphor. Furthermore, how do I know you aren't just a really smart and really depressed 4-year-old? That's much more likely than time travel.
Besides the fact that if I really were just simply suicidal, I'd just find a bridge or a roof or something to jump off of?
Izuku rolled his eyes.
Your civilian name is Aizawa Shota. Your birthday is on November 8th, and your favorite animal is cats.
Eraserhead frowned. All stuff that could be found easily enough if you know where to look.
Izuku sighed. You're married to your high school sweetheart, Yamada Hisashi, also known as President Mike.
Eraserhead frowned. What? We're not married. Izuku grimaced.
Whoops. Guess that hasn't happened yet this time. But it will.
Eraserhead was blushing. That's not very convincing.
What? But you two are so obviously in love!
Eraserhead's blush deepened. The time travel thing, not... Ugh. He stared off into the middle distance, looking completely dead inside. Izuku thought for a second.
Okay, let me do the math real quick.
God, even after all these years, Izuku still hated doing math. Even if he was good at it.
Okay, so, in like 4 years or so, All Might's gonna get in this fight with this villain called All For One. He can give and take quirks, and the two almost kill each other. All Might thinks he succeeded for like 6 years until my first year of UA, when All For One makes his comeback.
Eraserhead squinted at Izuku. Someone who can take and give quirks? That shouldn't be possible. Izuku rolled his eyes.
Yeah, and multi-quirked brain-dead killing machine shouldn't be either. But, well...
Izuku trailed off, remembering that the no one didn't exist yet. Ugh. Keeping the events in different timelines separate in his own head was becoming so hard.
Look, if you don't believe me, why don't we pay Detective Tsukauchi a visit?
Eraserhead frowned. The rookie. Izuku nodded.
Do you remember what his quirk is?
Eraserhead thought for a second, before his eyes lit up in understanding. Lie detector. Izuku nodded.
He can verify that everything I'm saying is the truth.
Eraserhead pursed his lips. His quirk won't register what you're saying is false if you're delusional. Eraserhead leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees and fingers laced together. Even if your story is true, and you're actually an old man in a child's body, my answer is still the same. I will not kill you. Izuku went to protest, but Eraserhead held up his hand. I wasn't done. I won't kill you as you are now. He sighed then, looking so tired. But if you still want to die when you turn 18, then I'll use my quirk on you. There were 2 things wrong with this. The first he immediately voiced.
But I turned 18 on my first run, and I've been through heaps of runs by now.
Eraserhead glared at Izuku. Yes, but right now you're 4 years old, and I will not be held accountable for a child's death. Izuku groaned. He should have known that Eraserhead's soft spot for children would just make this all the more harder for Izuku. It's not like Izuku himself could begrudge him for that. After all, it would be infinitely easier to end it all by simply using one of the quirk-racing bullets manufactured by the Shihasuke on himself so he wouldn't come back. But Izuku couldn't stomach the thought of letting Overhaul torture Eri for his experiments. In fact, the few constants in Izuku's many loops were saving both Koda, on his functionally quirkless runs a simple bullet to Muscular's head had done the trick, and Eri. Izuku had used a couple of different methods for this. Killing Overhaul, gassing the compound and slipping in before leaving with Eri, showing up conveniently at Eri's house the same day as her quirk manifests, and dosing her with a mild quirk suppressant in order to stop her from accidentally rewinding her father out of existence. Really, he had it down to a science these days. That left Izuku with his second problem. See, Izuku's quirk gave him the unique opportunity to really study the butterfly effect and the ripples caused by the different actions he takes. One of the most prominent examples of this ripple effect are deaths. In particular, the deaths of Asui Tsuyu, Mineta Minoru, and Aizawa Shota at the attack on the USJ on the loops when Izuku wasn't there and didn't interfere. The USJ attack, which happened when Izuku is 15. Eraserhead can't kill Izuku if he's dead. Izuku sighs, closes his eyes, and takes a deep breath before examining his options. 1. Tip the school off before the attack so they're prepared. From Izuku's past experience, he knows that doing this causes chaos and ends with Izuku in an interrogation room being grilled for hours on how he knew about the attack beforehand, since his stupid toe joints declare him medically quirkless. 2. Preemptively destroy the USJ. Can't get attacked at the USJ if the USJ isn't standing. Except, leveling a building like the USJ would take some serious firepower. Serious firepower that would be a pain to get a hold of as a weedy-looking young teenager. 3. Once again become a hero, take the UA entrance exam, and get into Eraserhead's class so he can be in a position to protect him. 4. Assassinate the entire League of Villains, leaving no survivors. Izuku opened his eyes, knowing which option he would have to take. Do we have a deal? Izuku nodded.
Yeah.
He yawned. This body wasn't used to getting up at dawn yet, but it would only be a matter of time and training.
Guess I'll see you at the entrance exams.
Eraserhead tilted his head to the side in confusion. What entrance exams? Izuku shook his head.
Don't worry about it. I better go before my mom finds out I'm gone.
Eraserhead narrowed his eyes. Oh, no you don't. You're not gonna leave just like that. I need your name and a way to keep in contact with you, to make sure you're not gonna do something stupidly reckless. Izuku slouched into the couch.
There's no point of being reckless and possibly dying, though. I just go back to a few days ago, and I'd have to have this conversation with you all over again. Once was enough.
Eraserhead looked like he could see where Izuku was coming from. I'll still be needing a name. Izuku groaned.
Don't think I don't know that you're just gonna use it to stalk me.
He let his head in a lull to the side.
My name's Midoriya Izuku.
Eraserhead immediately reached for his phone, but Izuku raised his hand.
Nope, you're not gonna tell anyone this.
Eraserhead gave Izuku a smile. Condescending bastard. Izuku tapped into his villain persona as he smiled, all teeth.
It would be a rather frustrating and time-consuming problem for me if I had to live the rest of my life in a mental hospital constantly on suicide watch,
Izuku conceded.
But the staff wouldn't be able to stop me forever. One day I'd die, and then I'd just wake up as a 4-year-old again.
Eraserhead was beginning to look unsettled. Good.
And I'll still have the same problem. I'll still need your help to die. Except this time, I'll know that coming to you and asking politely won't work, and I'll have to resort to other means.
Eraserhead glared. Are you threatening me? Izuku shrugged.
Not you specifically, obviously, since I need your quirk.
Izuku pretended to think for a bit.
Present Mike, on the other hand.
Eraserhead's quirk activated out of rage, and Izuku smiled. Izuku was actually rather fond of Present Mike, so he probably wouldn't need to actually hurt him. Maybe abduct him for a bit and keep him in a nice bunker for a couple of days. But Eraserhead didn't know that. You would murder a pro hero, just so you can finally die? Eraserhead asked, looking strained. Izuku's face went blank.
It won't be the first time I've killed. I'm so tired, Eraserhead. I just want to finally rest.
Eraserhead could obviously hear the sincerity in his voice, if the look on his face was anything to go off of. The mix between pain, anger, and pity. Have you considered therapy? Izuku scoffed.
That time I ended up in the psych ward? No one believed I had this quirk since the whole toe joint meaning quirkless theory won't get disproven for another 2 decades. So they threw me in there and threw away the key. I ended up making friends with Todoroki Ray. I introduced her to Mario Kart. That was a blast. And we bonded over shared trauma. Did you know I actually grew up thinking I was totally quirkless the first time round? That was fun.
Izuku tilted his head to the side.
I always find it hilarious that if I had taken my best friend's advice to take a swan dive off of a roof and hope for a quirk in the next life, I would have prematurely discovered my quirk.
Eraserhead's eyes widened. You were told to what? Izuku waved him off.
No biggie. In every other loop I've done, I've made damn sure to bring him down a few notches. Helped him with both his superiority complex and his inferiority complex. I actually ended up writing a 53-page dissertation on him for my psychology class once. I got top marks on it.
Eraserhead groaned. That's nice. But I need to make sure you get home safe so I can come back home and sleep for a week. Izuku nodded. As nice as it was actually talking about the feats he had completed in his other loops with someone who wouldn't throw him in the psych ward, not that hanging out with Todoroki Ray wasn't nice, after she got over the fear of hurting him, that is. But being drugged and manhandled by the orderlies is something Izuku would rather not do again.
Shit!
Izuku softly exclaimed.
This is hopefully my last run, which means I have a lot of stuff I need to do right since I won't have any do-overs.
That's nice. What's your address? Eraserhead asked tiredly.
I'm gonna have to take down the number 2 hero, the hero commission, the LOV, and the MLA all in one run. I'm gonna be so busy.
What? Izuku put his head in his hands.
I'm gonna be so busy. I probably won't have any free time until I'm like 10. It means I won't be able to get a few pieces of hero merch I really want because I won't have enough time to camp outside of the stores. Oh no!
Izuku looked up at Eraserhead in horror.
I won't be able to get that limited edition Eraserhead shampoo that comes out in a few months.
What? Eraserhead opened his mouth before closing it a few times. He closed his eyes once more, putting his face in his hands. I'm too tired for this. Izuku couldn't help but agree. There was a sound of keys in a lock, and the front door to the apartment swung open. A young man with blonde hair crept into the apartment, before stopping short at the sight of Izuku and Eraserhead, both looking devastated. Show? What's going on?
Hi, President Mike!
Izuku called, waving at the man. Mike was looking between the two with mounting concern. Izuku took a second to take note of his appearance. His face was mostly the same, though his hair was shorter and he was missing his mustache. Eraserhead looked up at President Mike, looking simply exhausted. Let's just get this kid home, yeah? President Mike rushed over, hands hovering over Eraserhead, as he fretted over his appearance. You okay, babe? Eraserhead hid his face in his capture weapon, though that did nothing to hide his blush at the pet name. He sent a glare at a smug-looking Izuku, who simply pointed at his ring finger. Can you please take this kid home? I don't think it's safe for him to be walking by himself. Now it was Izuku's turn to glare, before reaching into his onesie and producing a butterfly knife that had been his father's. Eraserhead's eyes widened subtly, before he closed his eyes once more. Izuku quickly hid the knife away before President Mike could see it. He seemed like the type to confiscate knives from children out of a sense of concern for their well-being. Yeah, I can take the little listener home. He easily slipped on his hero persona before turning to Izuku. What's your name, little buddy?
I'm Midoriya Izuku.
President Mike wasn't the only one who could act. Izuku internally sighed as he slapped on his cheerful toddler persona. It was so tiring to keep up. It had been such a relief to drop it on Eraserhead. Okay, buddy, what's your address? Izuku rattled it off, and President Mike nodded. That's not too far from here. I'll escort you home so Grumpy Pants here can get some sleep, okay? Izuku nodded before getting up, just to once again get picked up. Izuku, however, had been half expecting it this time. The man loved kids, most evident in how he interacted with Eri. Now, little listener, say goodbye to Shota. Izuku nodded, gathering as much cheer as possible before loudly calling out,
Bye, Eraserhead, sir.
Eraserhead winced, before half-heartedly waving. Izuku saw President Mike grin as he looked between Izuku and Eraserhead and shuddered. He hoped nothing bad would come out of this. The two left the apartment, President Mike carrying Izuku to the train station. Izuku didn't bother protesting. He was tired from walking so far in his tiny 4-year-old body. President Mike kept up a polite chatter, mostly surface-level questions and anecdotes for most of the walk, though stopped after a few possibly exaggerated yawns. Shut up, he was a growing boy who needed his rest. They hopped on the train and took it to Izuku's neighborhood. Izuku didn't realize that the train's rhythmic movement had rocked him to sleep until President Mike was gently shaking him awake. Izuku yawned widely before looking around. They were at the station near Izuku's home. We're nearly home, little listener, President Mike announced once Izuku was lucid. Izuku nodded. still a little sleepy. I don't come here very often, so could you point me in the right direction? Izuku nodded once again, pointing left. President Mike began to walk in that direction. He was quiet for a moment before he spoke up again. So, little listener, what were you doing up so early in the morning on a Saturday so far away from home?
I needed to talk to Eraserhead about something.
Izuku could picture the frown on his young teacher's face. Are you okay, kiddo? Do you need help? Izuku nodded.
Yeah, Eraserhead's gonna help me.
Izuku could hear the smile in President Mike's voice as he said, Oh? Is that so? What do you need help with, little listener? Maybe I can help. Izuku shook his head.
Only Eraserhead can help me.
The rest of the walk was in an awkward silence. Izuku ignored it. They ended up in front of Izuku's apartment building in no time. Izuku tried to get President Mike to just drop him off out front, but he insisted on walking Izuku to the door. Izuku went to unlock the front door with the spare key that he had borrowed, only for the door to be opened before he could fit the key in the lock, by Izuku's mother. She stood in the doorway, hair unbrushed in her nightdress and sleeping gown.
Fuck me gently with a chainsaw.
Izuku muttered quietly under his breath in English, since he could neither get himself out of the habit of swearing, nor be caught swearing by his mother. Thank goodness, he was still young enough that his occasional English swears were just brushed off as babble. However, Izuku forgot to account for a pro hero standing right next to him, both fluent in English and still wearing his hero-grade hearing aids, who was able to hear him perfectly. President Mike choked on his own spit, coughing into his elbow. Are you okay, sir? Izuku's mom asked as she used her quirk to pull Izuku into her arms. Izuku squirmed. The two things that irked him about being a kid again were A, no one taking him seriously, and B, being considered a small object by his mom's quirk. President Mike stopped coughing long enough to nod, his face bright red as he struggled for air. He finally caught his breath, and gave Izuku the side eye as he addressed Izuku's mom. Sorry about that. I just came to make sure the little guy got home safe. Izuku's mom smiled wide. Thank you so much. I was so worried when I woke up and he wasn't there. She then turned a stern look onto Izuku, who ducked his head guiltily. Yes, he may be freaking ancient, but he still respects his mom. Well, President Mike started, looking a little ill. I'll just go then. Goodbye. He turned on his heel and quickly made his way to the entrance. Whoops. Izuku may have just accidentally broken a pro hero. Izuku firmly pushed the thought out of his mind as his mom carried him inside. Izuku may have ended up being lectured to within an inch of his life that morning, but at the very least, the nap he had afterwards was one of the best naps he's had. And that's kind of the one time he had to get his arm amputated and the doctors had kept him high as a kite for the next couple of days. Oh, how much better he sleeps, knowing his days on this earth are numbered. When he woke up later that morning, he grabbed a fresh notebook and a pencil and got to work, laying out a 12-year plan to leave the world a better place when he was gone. As much as Shota wanted to climb back into bed as soon as Hisashi left with the kid, he simply couldn't. The mantra of, "What the fuck just happened?" kept playing in his head on a loop. So he just lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling until Hisashi came home. Hisashi poked his head in their bedroom, and Shota turned his head to let him know that he was awake. Hisashi immediately climbed onto the bed, pulling Shota so his back was pressed to his chest. When Hisashi got settled, the two lay still for a few seconds, before Hisashi whispered in his ear, "Shota? Babe? Where the fuck did you find that kid?" Shota groaned. "I didn't find him. He found me." Hisashi pressed his face to the back of Shota's head. He swore fluently in English, babe. Shota closes his eyes. "I'm not dealing with this right now. This is gonna be a problem for future Shota. Right now, I'm just going to sleep." Hisashi ran his fingers through Shota's hair. "Sleep, babe. We can discuss adoption when you wake up." Shota groaned louder. Alright. Thank you so much to Speedwagon's Glorious Main for having a permission statement on Podfics. I really enjoyed podficking this work. I'm having a little bit of trouble though, just because the way that everything's formatted. Run-on sentences are really hard to read out loud. At least in a way that kind of makes sense to me as a reader. No matter what though, the idea of this just completely done with everything Izuku, who just goes to Eraserhead and is like, please, 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 I need you to put me on my mercy. Immediately, please. Please, 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 kill me. And Eraserhead's just like, this is a 4-year-old. Look, people can say whatever they want about me. I'm not gonna kill a 4-year-old. And Izuku just starts wailing, just like, God, why not? It's like, look, wait 14 years. Not, is 14 years? I mean, like 14-ish years. Wait 14 years. If you can wait another 14 years, fine, okay? You can die then. But stop it. Stop. But overall, I'm really enjoying this work, and I look forward to podficking more of it. Due to the length of the chapters in this fic, I'm anticipating uploading a podfic of this work every month or so, which I hope you'll be patient with me for. So I'll be finishing this podfic here. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you when I do. Toodaloo!